My husband left filled divorce papers, thinking I'd beg. He cried like a baby when I filed for real. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. My husband left divorce papers on the table, smirking like he had already won. He thought I would fall apart, beg him to stay, and cling to the marriage like I couldn't survive without him. But when I signed those papers and filed them for real, the look on his face was priceless. He cried like a baby. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emma, and for 7 years I thought I had built a solid life with my husband. We lived in a cozy home in the suburbs, both had steady jobs, and to the outside world we seemed like the perfect couple. We laughed at barbecues with neighbors, exchanged smiles at church on Sundays, and celebrated anniversaries with flowers and wine. I believed we had a future filled with love, security, and family. But small cracks began to show. Daniel came home late more often, brushing off my questions with sharp answers. He grew impatient over little things. If dinner was 10 minutes late, if the laundry wasn't folded exactly how he liked, if I asked about his day. I told myself he was just stressed from work, maybe overwhelmed by bills or tired of routine. I kept giving him the benefit of the doubt, convincing myself that marriage meant patience and understanding. Yet, something about his distance gnawed at me. His laughter faded, his warmth disappeared, and I started to feel like a guest in my own home. Nights that used to be filled with conversation and comfort were replaced by silence. He would sit scrolling through his phone, barely noticing me, and I began to wonder if I was invisible to him. Then one evening, I walked into the dining room and froze. On the table sat a stack of papers neatly placed in a folder with my name written across the front. I picked it up, hands trembling, and read the words, "Petition for divorce." Every line was filled out, my name, his, our marriage date, the division of property. He had prepared everything without a word, as if my feelings didn't matter. When Daniel saw me holding the folder, he smirked. "It's easier this way," he said casually, like he was asking me to pass the salt. My heart dropped, but I kept my face steady. I couldn't believe the man I had shared 7 years of my life with could be so cold, so sure that I would break down and beg him not to leave. At that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized he wasn't just drifting away. He had already decided I was disposable. That night, as I stared at those papers, a quiet determination took root in me. If Daniel thought I would collapse, he was about to learn he had underestimated. Dinner was quiet that night, the kind of silence that feels heavy. I set the plates down, trying to keep things normal, when Daniel suddenly pulled a folder from his bag and tossed it across the table. The papers slid right in front of me, covering my plate. He leaned back in his chair, chewing like nothing had happened, and said, "Just sign. We're done. You'll crawl back anyway." His tone was flat, almost bored, like he was giving instructions instead of tearing apart my life. My chest tightened, but I didn't let him see how deeply his words cut. I kept my face calm, though inside I was shaking. I picked up the papers and looked at him, searching for some sign of regret, some trace of the man I had once trusted. But there was nothing. His eyes were cold, daring me to react, almost hoping I would break down. I refused to give him that satisfaction. I forced my voice to stay steady as I asked him why. He laughed, a cruel sound, and shrugged. "Don't act surprised. You had to know this was coming." When I pressed further, hinting at whether there was someone else, his smirk grew wider. He mocked me, saying, "Of course, that's what you'd think. You always imagine I've got someone else lined up. You should worry about yourself instead. You won't last 5 minutes without me." His words hit me harder than the papers themselves. It wasn't just that he wanted out. It was the way he looked down on me, the way he believed I was weak. He leaned across the table and added, "You'll come crawling back. They all do." He said it with such certainty, like he had already written my reaction in his head, like my pain was entertainment to him. I nodded slowly, hiding the storm inside me. If he expected tears, begging, or desperate promises, he wasn't going to get them. I swallowed the hurt, pressing it down where he couldn't see it. But the betrayal was clear. He wasn't just leaving me, he was mocking me for ever believing in him. That night, after he fell asleep on the couch without a care in the world, I sat alone in the bedroom. My hands shook as I held the papers again, staring at the empty space where my signature was supposed to go. Every insult he had thrown replayed in my mind, that I couldn't survive, that I would come crawling, that I wasn't strong enough without him. Tears welled in my eyes, but I wiped them away quickly. Crying wouldn't fix anything. He wanted me broken, but I refused to give him that power. Instead, a quiet resolve settled in. If he believed I was helpless, I would prove him wrong. If he thought I would beg, I would make him regret underestimating. In that moment, my heartbreak turned into determination. I wasn't going to crawl back. I was going to rise, and Daniel would be the one left crawling. The days after that dinner felt heavier than ever. I stopped asking Daniel questions and instead started watching him closely. His routines didn't add up anymore. He claimed to be working late, but his shirts came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I noticed how carefully he avoided eye contact when he walked through the door, and how quickly he disappeared into the shower as if trying to wash something away. One evening, while folding laundry, I slipped my hand into the pocket of his jacket and found a folded receipt. It wasn't from a restaurant near his office. It was from a hotel 2 towns over, the kind of place people used for a few hours, not overnight stays. The date and time matched a night he told me he was stuck at work late. My chest burned, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. I tucked the receipt into a drawer instead of confronting him. After that, I started checking more carefully. Every time he tossed his clothes aside, I searched the pocket. More slips appeared, small charges at hotels, odd receipts that didn't match his stories. Each one told me the truth he refused to admit. Still, I kept my silence. If I exploded too soon, I would have nothing to stand on. I needed proof, not just suspicion. The confirmation I dreaded finally came one night when he thought I was asleep. I woke to the low murmur of his voice in the kitchen. Quietly, I got up and stood by the doorway, careful not to make a sound. He was on the phone, whispering. My stomach dropped when I heard the name Melissa. I recognized it instantly. She was a woman from his office. His voice softened in a way it never did with me anymore. I can't wait to see you again, he whispered, almost laughing. She's clueless. Don't worry. He chuckled, and the sound sliced through me like glass. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just an affair. It was the humiliation. He thought I was blind, too weak to notice, too naive to act. I stepped back into the shadows, heart pounding, and returned quietly to bed. He walked back into the room minutes later, slipping under the covers like nothing had happened. I kept my breathing steady, pretending to sleep, though every part of me was screaming inside. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront him yet. Yelling wouldn't change him. Tears wouldn't shame him. The only thing that would matter was proof. So I started keeping everything: receipts, notes about his late nights, even the way he snapped at me without reason. Each detail went into a folder I hid away. Daniel thought I was powerless, but he didn't realize I was building my strength in silence. The day would come when all his lies, his arrogance, and his betrayal would turn against him. And when it did, he wouldn't see it coming. I knew I couldn't face Daniel empty-handed. If I let my anger lead me, he would win. He believed I was too weak to act, but I decided to move carefully, quietly, and with purpose. The first step was finding someone who could guide me. I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer named Mr. Jacobs, a calm, older man with a sharp mind and a steady voice. I sat in his office with trembling hands, sliding the folder of receipts across the desk. He looked through the papers, nodding slowly. After a few minutes, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Emma, he thinks he's playing you. But if we're smart, the law will be on your side." Hearing those words gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. For the first time, I realized I wasn't trapped. I had options, and I had the strength to use them. Mr. Jacobs gave me clear instructions. I needed to gather every financial record I could find: bank statements, retirement accounts, savings, anything tied to our names. He explained that judges look closely at assets during a divorce, and hiding money was not only dishonest but illegal. His advice was simple: document everything before Daniel realized what I was doing. That night, while Daniel slept soundly in the next room, I sat at the dining table with a small lamp on, combing through drawers and files. I collected statements from our joint account, retirement savings, and insurance documents. Each piece of paper went into a new folder, separate from the one filled with evidence of his affair. It felt like I was piecing together a puzzle he thought I'd never solve. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. Small transfers here and there caught my eye. At first, I thought they were just expenses I hadn't noticed, but the amounts were too round, too regular. With some digging, I realized Daniel had been moving money out of our shared account and funneling it into another one I didn't recognize. I followed the trail until the truth was undeniable. He had opened a separate account under his name, and the dates of transfers lined up suspiciously with his nights out with Melissa. Instead of despair, a strange calm came over me. Every piece of evidence gave me more strength. He wasn't just cheating with another woman. He was trying to cheat me out of the life we had built together. But now I had the tools to make sure he couldn't get away with it. I looked at the growing pile of files and receipts, feeling the weight of them. They weren't just papers. They were my shield, my proof, my way forward. I wasn't going to walk away empty-handed while he played house with someone else. If Daniel wanted to throw away our marriage, then I would make sure I walked away with everything I deserved. And I would do it quietly, without him ever realizing how close his downfall was. Daniel no longer cared to hide what he was doing. He came home late without explanation, sometimes not at all, and when he was there, he barely looked at me. His phone was always in his hand, his smile reserved for someone else. If I asked where he had been, he waved me off like I was a stranger in his house. The man who once shared every detail of his day now acted as though I was invisible. The cruelty was not in his absence alone, but in the way he flaunted it. He would walk through the door smelling of perfume and grinning, as if daring me to speak. When I stayed quiet, he seemed almost disappointed. His games were meant to break me down, to make me feel small, powerless, and unwanted. Each night he stayed out, each cold glance he gave me, drove another nail into the coffin of the marriage I had tried so hard to hold together. One evening, the mask slipped completely. We sat in the living room, silence between us heavy as always, when he leaned back with a smirk and said, "You'll sign those papers when I tell you to. Until then, you're just here to keep the house warm." His words cut deeper than any of his late nights or lies. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was humiliation. He wasn't content to leave me. He wanted to crush my dignity before he walked away. I sat there, staring at him, feeling something inside me shift. My heart didn't ache the same way it had before. Instead, it hardened. The sadness that once drowned me turned into a calm clarity. I saw him for what he was. Not a husband, not a partner, but a man who believed I had no worth without him. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't only about an affair or lost love. This was about proving that my dignity was not his to take. That night, after he stumbled into bed without a care in the world, I stayed up alone in the dining room. I spread out every folder I had built over the week. Receipts, statements, hotel records, transfers, notes of his late nights. All of it was there. I checked each paper carefully, making sure nothing was missing. For hours, I worked quietly, stacking and sorting, building the final picture of what he had done. By the time the clock struck midnight, the folder was complete. I closed it slowly, my hand steady. The fear that once paralyzed me was gone. In its place was determination. Daniel thought he was in control, that I was nothing without him. But I was the one holding all the proof, all the power. As I slid the folder back into its hiding place, I whispered to myself, "It's time." The final move was ready, and soon he would learn just how wrong he had been about me. The papers had been sitting in the drawer for weeks, a constant reminder of his smug grin when he first threw them at me. Every time I saw them, I remembered his words, "You'll sign when I tell you to." That night, after finishing my folder of evidence, I pulled them out again. The lines were already filled, my name already written, as if my choice never mattered. For a long moment, I stared at the empty space meant for my signature. Then, with a steady hand, I signed. Not because he told me to, but because I was ready to take control. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Jacobs' office with the papers in hand. He looked at me carefully, as if checking to see if I was sure. I laid the folder of evidence beside them and said, "File everything." His nod was calm but approving, like he had been waiting for this moment too. Within an hour, the process had begun. The papers were no longer sitting in my house. They were in the court system, official, untouchable. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of freedom. Meanwhile, Daniel went on as if nothing had changed. He was still sneaking around, still slipping out at odd hours, still carrying that same arrogance on his shoulders. He believed I was sitting at home, broken and waiting for his command. He didn't realize that while he laughed in hotel rooms and whispered into his phone, the ground beneath him was shifting. Days passed, then weeks. I kept my silence, going about my routine while the case moved forward. Daniel didn't notice the careful looks I gave him, the calmness in my voice, the way I no longer reacted to his taunts. He thought he was winning, and that was exactly what I wanted him to think. Then one evening, he came home later than usual. I was in the kitchen when I heard a firm knock at the door. Daniel opened it, only to find a man standing there with an envelope. I watched from the hallway as the man handed him the papers. "You've been served," the messenger said before leaving. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, confused. He opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the words quickly, and then I saw it, the exact moment his arrogance cracked. His face drained of color, his hands trembling slightly as he read. The divorce papers were official, stamped, and sealed. But what shocked him most was the line that named me as the petitioner. I hadn't just signed his papers, I had turned them into my own. He looked at me across the room, his voice unsteady for the first time. You filed." I met his eyes calmly. "Yes, Daniel, I filed." For the first time since all of this began, I saw something new in his expression. It wasn't smugness. It wasn't control. It was fear. And it was only the beginning. Daniel didn't take long to explode after being served. He came storming through the front door one evening, slamming it so hard the frame rattled. His face was red, his voice shaking with fury as he shouted, "What the hell is this? You filed? You can't do this without me." He paced the living room like a cornered animal, throwing his arms in the air. To him, This wasn't just about divorce. It was about control slipping through his fingers. I sat on the couch, calm, steady, and waiting. His anger rolled over me, but I refused to flinch. When he finally stopped, glaring at me for an answer, I spoke in an even tone. You left the papers first, Daniel. I just did what you asked. For a second, he looked confused, like he couldn't believe I had turned his own move against him. But before he could argue, I reached for the folder I had kept hidden all this time. I placed it on the coffee table and slid it toward him. You should see what I've collected, I said quietly. His expression shifted as he opened the folder. Inside were the hotel receipts I had pulled from his jacket, the bank transfers that showed money funneled into his secret account, the notes of his late nights, and even a written summary of the night I heard him whispering to Melissa on the phone. His smirk faded with every page he turned. This doesn't mean anything, he muttered, but the shake in his voice betrayed him. It means everything, I replied. It means you don't get to walk away clean while humiliating me. It means the judge will see exactly who you've been and what you've done. Daniel sank into the chair across from me, his head in his hands. The arrogance I had lived with for months seemed to drain out of him. He had always believed he held all the power, that I would collapse the moment he pushed me. But now the truth lay in front of him in black and white, undeniable. He looked up at me, eyes desperate. Emma, you don't have to do this. Melissa, she doesn't mean anything. I can fix this. We can fix this. For the first time, I almost laughed. His sudden shift wasn't about me. It was about what he stood to lose. The house, the savings, the reputation he had worked so hard to protect. Melissa wasn't worth the cost, and he finally knew it. But it was too late. I leaned back and said softly, You made your choice when you handed me those papers. I'm just finishing what you started. Daniel's confidence shattered completely in that moment. The man who once mocked me as weak now sat silent, realizing he had underestimated me from the very beginning. And there was no undoing it now. The day of the hearing arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with Mr. Jacobs at my side. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, only from the weight of what was about to end. Daniel sat across the room, shifting in his seat, his confidence gone. The same man who once smirked at me over dinner now looked pale and restless. Melissa was nowhere to be seen. For all his promises to her, she hadn't even bothered to show up. He was alone. When the judge called the case, Mr. Jacobs rose and presented the folder we had built piece by piece. Every receipt, every transfer, every note of his late nights was laid out clearly. He explained how Daniel had used hotel rooms for his affair, how he had secretly funneled money into another account, and how he had abandoned me emotionally and financially while pretending nothing was wrong. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue, but with every piece of evidence, his case grew weaker. The judge flipped through the papers silently, his face stern. I sat quietly, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to let Daniel see anything on my face. At one point, the judge looked directly at Daniel and asked, Do you deny any of this? Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his voice low. I didn't think it was like that. His excuses sounded hollow in the echo of the courtroom. He glanced at me, searching for sympathy, but I gave him nothing. When it was time for the ruling, the courtroom grew still. The judge's words were firm. I would keep the house. I would receive alimony. I was entitled to a portion of his retirement and savings, despite his attempt to hide them. The law had seen through his deceit. Daniel's head dropped as the words sank in. His shoulders slumped, his hands tightening around the edge of the table. The arrogance that once filled the room whenever he walked in had vanished completely. He had tried to discard me like I was nothing, but instead, the court had stripped him of the very things he thought he controlled. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply sat in silence, letting the weight of justice settle in the room. My victory didn't need laughter or loud celebration. The truth itself was enough. When the gavel struck, it was final. The marriage he thought he could end on his terms had ended on mine. As people began to leave, Daniel stayed in his chair, staring down at the papers in front of him. His perfect plan had backfired, leaving him with nothing but regret. I walked out of the courtroom with my head high, my steps steady. I didn't need to look back. My silence, my calm, and my strength were the loudest answers I could ever give. My victory spoke for itself. Daniel's downfall came faster than even I expected. The court's decision had left him with less than he imagined, and the weight of it showed in the weeks that followed. Melissa, who had once filled his nights with secret smiles and whispered promises, didn't stay long after realizing the money was gone. She wasn't interested in a man who had lost his house, a good part of his savings, and the security he once bragged about. She left quietly, and Daniel didn't even have the strength to chase after her. Without Melissa, he looked for support among his friends. But people talk, and soon everyone knew the truth. The man they once admired at parties and praised for his confidence was now nothing more than a cheater with empty pockets. Friends stopped inviting him, neighbors avoided him, and his reputation fell apart. He had thought leaving me would give him freedom, but instead, it left him standing alone in the wreckage he created. I, on the other hand, stayed silent. I didn't speak badly about him. I didn't need to. His actions told the story better than I ever could. Still, that didn't stop him from trying to reach me. Calls came late at night, his voice slurred, begging to talk. Sometimes he left messages, saying he was sorry, saying he wanted to explain. But I never answered. I had already heard enough from him, and none of it had been truth. One evening, the knocking at my door startled me. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, his eyes red and swollen. He looked nothing like the man who had once smirked at me with so much pride. His voice cracked as he said, "I made a mistake. Please take me back." For a moment, I studied him, remembering the night he first pushed those divorce papers in front of me, daring me to sign. I remembered the way he had laughed, telling me I would crawl back. And now here he was, standing on my porch, broken and begging. My voice was steady when I answered. "You ended this the moment you left those papers on the table." His face crumbled, but I didn't flinch. I didn't know him anger or comfort. I owed myself peace. With that, I closed the door. On the other side, I could hear him mutter something, maybe my name, maybe another plea. But I didn't listen. That door wasn't just shutting on him. It was shutting on every insult, every betrayal, and every moment he tried to strip me of my worth. Inside my home, I felt a wave of quiet relief. He had thought I would crawl. Instead, he was the one left outside in tears. And I finally had the closure I needed. Months passed, and life slowly began to take on a new shape for me. At first, the quiet felt strange. The house that had once carried the weight of arguments and tension now felt calm, almost like it could breathe again. I no longer woke up dreading what mood Daniel would bring home. Instead, I opened my eyes each morning with a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I found a new job, one that challenged me and reminded me of the woman I used to be before everything with Daniel consumed me. My coworkers welcomed me, and over time, some of them became true friends. We shared laughs, long conversations, and simple joys that had been missing from my life for far too long. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small or unworthy. I felt alive. My home, too, reflected the change inside me. I rearranged furniture, painted walls, and made it mine again. No longer was it just a place where Daniel came and went as he pleased. It was my sanctuary now, filled with warmth, quiet music, and laughter from the people who truly cared about me. Each corner of it reminded me that I had survived, and more importantly, I had grown stronger. Every so often, I would hear bits about Daniel. A mutual acquaintance mentioned he wasn't doing well. He had lost most of what he valued: money, respect, even the woman he thought would replace me. He was bitter, lonely, and broke. And though once upon a time, that news might have made me angry or sad, now it only brought me clarity. He had gambled with our life together, and he had lost. I often thought back to the moment he slid those divorce papers toward me with a smug grin. He believed I would beg him to stay, that I would fall apart without him. He was certain I couldn't survive on my own. But here I was not just surviving, thriving. I carried myself with a strength I hadn't known I had, and I no longer needed anyone to validate my worth. The sweetest part of it all was that my revenge required no screaming, no fighting, no dramatic gestures. It was quiet. It was simple. I walked away and I rebuilt. I didn't waste my breath trying to make him see the pain he caused. I didn't shout about his betrayal. Instead, I let him live with the choices he made, while I created a new life without him. He was left broken, crying like the baby he once mocked me to be. And I was free, lighter than ever before. In the end, my silence was louder than any words I could have spoken. My quiet revenge was living a life of peace, strength, and happiness, while he was left to face the emptiness of his own making.